Snow fell thick and fast as Jake pushed through the mountain trail, his breath fogging in the freezing air. The wind howled through the trees, but he kept calling out, "Bear! Bear, where are you?" His voice cracked with desperation. Jake was a single dad doing his best to hold things together after losing his wife the year before. Now, his dog, his son's best friend and the last connection to the life they had, was missing. Dressed in an old coat patched at the elbows, with boots soaked through, he had no business being out in a storm like this. But he couldn't turn back. The job interview he was supposed to attend that morning, a long-shot chance at stability, was now a distant thought. What mattered more was finding Bear. Snow crunched under his feet as he scanned the forest, heart pounding with cold and fear. His mind flashed back to his son's tears when Bear hadn't come home last night. Jake had promised he'd find him. He reached a ridge, breathless, and stopped. Silence blanketed the woods, except for the wind's lonely wail. Looking up at the darkening sky, he whispered, "I can't lose you too," his voice almost lost in the wind. For a moment, he stood there, alone, exhausted, and on the verge of tears. Then, in the distance, came a faint bark. Jake's heart jumped. Hope sparked. He turned toward the sound, unaware that what he was about to find would change all their lives forever. Jake followed the distant barking, stumbling through the thick snow, his legs heavy and numb. The sound led him to a rocky slope where the wind seemed to hush. There, partially hidden by a curtain of snow, was a dark opening, a cave. He stepped closer and froze. A soft, muffled cry echoed from within. He moved inside cautiously, eyes adjusting to the dimness. What he saw made his heart lurch. Huddled in a corner were a young woman and two children, wrapped in thin clothes, their faces pale and lips blue. The little girl whimpered, and the boy clung to his mother, shivering violently. And beside them, curled like a guardian angel, was Bear, his dog. The animal looked up, tail thumping weakly, but he didn't move from the children's side. He had been keeping them warm all night. The woman looked up, eyes wide with fear and hope. "We broke down 2 days ago, no one came," she whispered. Her voice trembled as much as her body. Jake didn't hesitate. He stripped off his coat and wrapped it around the smallest child, then crouched beside them. The job, the interview, everything else vanished from his mind. These people needed help now. "We're getting out of here," he said, voice steady despite the fear in his gut. He stroked Bear's head and whispered, "Good boy." In that frozen cave, surrounded by strangers, Jake didn't feel like he'd lost something. For the first time in a long while, he felt found. The morning sun crept over the ridge, casting a pale gold light across the frozen landscape. Jake's legs burned as he trudged upward, every step a battle against fatigue and ice. On his back, the smallest child clung tightly, face buried in his shoulder, while the mother followed behind, barely able to keep pace. Her breath came in shallow gasps, but she pressed on, driven by the quiet strength Jake had shown in the cave. Jake reached into his pack and pulled out the last granola bar, his only food. He broke it into pieces and handed it to the boy and the mother, saving none for himself. He'd also given them the last sips of his water hours ago. Hunger gnawed at him, but he didn't care. Every time he looked over his shoulder and saw the little girl still walking, still breathing, he found the strength to go on. They climbed higher, where he hoped to find a signal, any signal, to call for help. As they neared the ridge's peak, Jake paused, the child asleep against his back, the wind whistling low. He stared out over the valley below, a vast white silence stretching in every direction. "Maybe I lost everything just to be here right now," he whispered. He thought of his late wife, the job he didn't get, the nights he cried alone. And somehow, standing in the cold with strangers who now felt like family, he realized, maybe this was the purpose behind all the pain. By late afternoon, the snow had eased, revealing a winding road that led to the top of a hill. At the crest stood a mansion, elegant, aged, and cloaked in white. Jake carried the sleeping child in his arms, the mother leaning on his shoulder for balance. Bear trotted ahead, weak but determined, as if he knew exactly where to go. They reached the iron gates just as they began to creak open. An elderly woman stepped out onto the porch, eyes widening in disbelief. She dropped her shawl and rushed forward, her voice cracking as she cried, "Emily. Is it really you?" The mother froze. "Mom." Her voice trembled, barely a whisper. They embraced, tears falling freely as the children stirred and clung to them both. Jake stood back, exhausted but relieved, watching a family reunite under the pale winter sun. The woman turned to him, eyes filled with gratitude. "You brought them back to me," she said softly. "How can I ever thank you?" He shrugged, too humbled to speak, but she stepped closer and took his hand. "Anyone who saves my family, is family." She looked down at Bear, who wagged his tail faintly. "And your loyal friend too." Moments later, they were inside the warmth of the mansion, wrapped in blankets, sipping hot soup, surrounded by light and love. Jake had set out to find his dog, but he'd found something far greater, a place where he belonged, and people who finally felt like home. The crackle of the fireplace filled the cozy living room, casting a golden glow across the walls. Jake sat on the soft couch, still wearing the same worn boots, now drying by the fire. The warmth wrapped around him like something he hadn't felt in years, not just heat, but belonging. The little boy was curled up beside him, head resting on Jake's chest. The girl clutched his hand, giggling as